It is recording. Perfect. Thank you, Nicholas.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Thank you. So, and then you have offensive realism that considers, and again, Marsheimer, you're going to see this name in the PowerPoint that I will be uploading in Blackboard about chapter 3. And offensive realism differs in the amount of power that states desire, right? Marsheimer and offensive realists, they propose that this narrow interest of this looks to promote or to enhance power is not a unlimited driver, is not a constant driver. That states behavior, even though yes, they're looking to promote and to push for protect their interests internationally, there's a limit, right? And the limit to that driver to protect and to enhance power is structural challenges, right? Economic needs, security needs, could be border issues, right? It could be war scenarios in military science are theories of war that states sometimes develop, right? To build up military capabilities, right? And that is very normal in, for example, South America, Asian countries, right? Armies is considered a healthy exercise, right? Armies, they develop these possible war scenarios following kind of a specific guidelines from where the conflict might come from, right? In the next year, in the next 2 years, right? And according to that, they plan exercises, sometimes joint exercises with other countries, right? So Mersheimer says that driver of powerful states to accumulate power is not unrestricted, and it's always and it's not unlimited. It always reacts to international and to structural pressures, right? Economic, military, security pressures. Someone's writing something. 1 second. Okay, I saw it. Is Jeremiah about the session? I'm recording. Yeah, I'm recording. Okay, and then you have this other theory. It is called Neoclassical Realism, and Neoclassical Realism, the higher scholar Gideon Rose proposed this idea in the 1980s, Neoclassical Realism. That yes, I mean, international arena is chaotic. That states are always looking to maximize power. But he said that not different from neorealists, right? These neoclassical realists, they say that not only structural factors shape states' behavior, but also domestic issues, right? Shape state behavior. In the chapter on foreign policies, we want to see that more clear with specific examples, right? So again, remember, neoclassical realism, they think that states behave and state behavior is shaped, right? Not only by structural pressures, economy, military, etc., but also domestic pressures, right? That political actors, sometimes elections, right, shape state behavior. And if you look at the campaign of Barack Obama in his first campaign, and also Trump's campaign, they spoke a lot about the U.S. intervention in the 21st century in the Middle East, right? This idea that the U.S. shouldn't be there, that these security issues should have been dealt in a different manner, and a lot of people voted, for example, for Obama because he proposed, right, the pulling out of troops from Iraq, right? So again, we see in that specific juncture, Obama, first 10 years of 21st century, right, proposing a foreign policy solution that actually helped him very much to win, right, that election. Besides other aspects of his proposals, right? You have comments about that? Ideas, comments, thoughts?
No.
Okay. Yeah, tell me.
I was going to say, I found it interesting, the point you made about the bringing the troops home thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that a lot of presidents talk about, a lot of world leaders always talk about, but especially in the United States, because we have our troops in so many other places.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to see what the reaction is when we actually bring them home. Some people are thrilled and they vote for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it's happening, some people say, we can't take them home. They need to be there. And so I just always found that interesting, how the troops and bringing them home is always like a core theme.
Yeah, since the Vietnam War, war perceptions change. When the war gets too long, not what was expected, and then the human toll is high, and then perception starts to change, right? That happens. I mean, even Vietnam, even the Spanish-American War, right after the independence war of the Philippines and as the U.S. troops, I mean, thousands of people died, and then the American citizens, the public didn't have clear at all why so many people had to die, and what kind of benefits are we taking from that sacrifice, right? And that's kind of a pitfall of realism and realism, to some extent neorealism, because they cannot explain that effectively why that contradiction happens when powerful states that they can act unilaterally. That's why they're superpowers, right? They can act unilaterally without asking anyone. At the end of the game, the ideas that they propose, the values that they propose to spread in the world, the country that they made a commitment to help, at the end ends up being a very difficult task, right, to achieve, and they end up causing the contrary effect of what they intended, right? The security dilemma. So going to liberalism, I'm going to try to finish this as quick as possible because I know you have more or less the ideas of what liberalism is, right? Liberalism rejects power politics, as you know. It accentuates mutual benefits and international cooperation, right? As liberals say that open economies, right? And also open political systems that are free, that allow their citizens to participate politically, that countries that have freedom of speech are inclined to cooperate and to look for benefits in free, liberalized economic, commercial, and political relations, right? And this is the idea that assumes that also countries that don't have the same system or same political economic system of free economies and free political systems are countries that are prone, right, to get into a war with the countries that have a free society and free economies. And this kind of theoretical projection is always a problem because we know that even countries, I mean, we have the case of North Korea, right? We have also many other cases of countries that don't have liberal, free economies, neither free political systems or with the freedom that we know, right, of our representative democracy, but neither are countries that are looking or they're actively trying to harm the United States, right? We have the case of Cuba. And the case of Cuba is more dramatic because even though Republicans in government have often looked forward to put Cuba in the list of terrorist nations, the U.S. and Cuba have been cooperating, I mean, permanently from the 1990s up until the present on different issues, right? Trade in international organizations such as the WTO, issues of immigration, drug trafficking, terrorism. Cuba is one of the most effective and loyal allies. I mean, when they need Cuba's, right? Cuba's support, right? When the U.S. needs Cuban support, Cuba is one of the most reliable and effective allies. Do you have a comment about that? Ideas? So liberalism, one second, I need to charge my computer. So liberalism Liberalism proposed that free societies are prone to build international organizations, and that's the model that we have. That's the world that we know, more or less. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, 90s, and that's the world that we knew. We had, I don't remember the Soviet Union that well, but in the 90s, you had international organizations that still are in place, the UN, WTO, organizations that most of the countries in the world that were democratic gave a space to communist countries to create international organizations. But the idea and the political will and the money to create those organizations came from the US and European countries. So yes, I mean, if we look back at the post-World War II world, yes, I mean, liberalism have done a lot of things, right? I remember that this thing of free trade, it didn't start now or in the 90s. It started right after World War II with the General Agreement on Tariff on Trade that started in San Francisco, the round of negotiations. And that is the rationale, right? That has been the rationale for all countries to agree to engage in those costly, time-consuming negotiations to liberalize trade, because the assumption is this will bring more world peace, because this will bring more economic stability to the countries in the world, right? So that's liberalism. That's the world we live. We know that the Trump administration is the first, which is a phenomenon, right? People are still trying to understand this new ideological makeup of the new Trump conservative, right? Framework, in which he's turning away from liberalism. And that is always a question mark. I always, these classes that when I teach Intro to IR, you have to ask yourself this question, right? How the US will continue be leading the world if what gave the power and what allowed the US to lead the world was precisely the institutions and the liberal multilateral system that was created after World War II. If you're going against that system that allowed you, right, and you fostered and allowed you to lead the world in economics, in ideals, cooperation, political models, right, ideas of the correct political models, how are you going, how that new leadership that Trump is proposing in the world, how that leadership will look like without being based upon liberal global ideals, right, that the U.S. promoted after World War II. So, right, so that's a question that I throw into you, so you can think about it. And that's liberalism. The idea that free economic, right, free societies are always prone to engage in positive international relations and durable, lasting, peaceful global structures or global institutions, and also practices, right? So within liberalism, write this down. You have this. We will see this in the blackboard that I will be uploading. But from neoliberalism, you have many concepts, and you have that in the chapter. So all these concepts are. Let me see if I can project this one second. One second. Share. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So, so out of liberalism, you have, and then also neoliberalism, that you, the distinction is it's more a political distinction between liberalism and neoliberalism. Neoliberalism responds to the institutions created after World War II that enhanced free trade, that also allowed for the signing of the, for example, Trans-Pacific Partnership, One second. Okay, Trans-Pacific Partnership. Okay, and what's it? And also the so-called Washington Consensus. Have you ever heard about the Washington Consensus? About that concept?
No.
Okay. So the Washington Consensus was a set of policies that were designed in Washington think tanks, Brookings institutions, and other think tanks in the 1980s. And this was supposed to be a recipe for Latin American countries to come out to transcend the financial crisis of the 1980s. If you remember, 1980s, it is called the lost decade, right? In Latin America, all the countries, all of them, fell into an economic financial default. The U.S. Later, that crisis in the case of Mexico dragged all the way until the early 90s, and the U.S. under President Clinton bailed out Mexico with a millionaire loan given to Mexico to assist Mexico to stabilize its banking system, right? So that's the Washington Consensus, right? A set of ideas that was projected and proposed by the U.S. government, by the U.S. Treasury, American think tanks, right, in D.C., on the variables and conditions that they assume that will assist, right, and what policies were needed to help Latin American countries to come out of that economic crisis, right? And that included, for example, the classic neoliberal recipe to move on, right, to transcend economic crisis and depression, which is, right, cutting payrolls, privatizing public assets, privatization of retirement plans, this idea that if you had a deficit of 9% or more in your national budget, then you need to move into aggressive neoliberal policies to resolve that, right? To go back to liquidity and to have the chance of bringing your country to a new economic resurgence. So the Washington Consensus, it is considered kind of the model, the classical model that neoliberals have been proposing and also proposing within the study of international relations. If you go into the World Bank, right, reports of the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, you have a lot of them from the 1990s, early 21st century, and all these reports have these assumptions, right? That if you don't have a productive economy and you have a lot of poor people in your country, and your middle class is shrinking, and the prices of natural resources are going down, you need to shrink the government in order to be able to foster and to energize kind of your economic apparatus in your country. So liberalism, neoliberalism, liberalism as a theory, and then neoliberalism as an adaptation or as a updating of that theory is not only a concept but also a recipe or a proposal that was developed in the 80s. So out of these liberal, neoliberal ideas, we have this concept that have been developed, right? Multilateralism, free trade, collective security, integration, functionalism, and interdependence, right? So all these concepts, multilateralism is the idea, right, that countries that have open regimes, they're more prone to sign agreements and coordinate national policies in groups, right? So when you hear the word multilateralism, that's what that means. It means countries that have similar political economic systems getting together and to resolve all kinds of issues, right? And you have different multilateralisms. You have the financial multilateralism, and that's the one that you find in the WTO, right, or World Bank. Even though these are banks, states are members, right, shareholders of these banks, international banks, and they give loans, as you know, to other other countries in need. We're going to study this issue of international organizations next chapter, I believe, on global governance and global and regional governance. That's chapter 5. And then we have also the concept of free trade, as I explained, right? You need to liberalize your economy, shrink the government, fight against your budget deficits. And in that way, you will be able to resolve your economic, foreign policy, international insertion problems, right? So free trade is another concept that is managed international relations analysis that comes from the liberal school of thought. Collective security, what I mentioned earlier, countries getting together to deal with what are perceptions of threat. Could be economic, could be terrorism, it could be cultural, could be border security issues, policing, governance issues, right? Some countries, as we mentioned earlier about South Korea, or for example, Cuba, right? Helping other countries to deal with specific issues, right? That they have domestically. Countries getting together, right? Countries that are engaged in the international economic system, they're prone to do this. Integration is a kind of a logical result of a liberal relationship between countries. We have the case of the European Union. We'll get into more details about the European Union in other chapters. But the European Union is the classic, more successful experience on how countries can foster. Okay. Someone there also. Okay. Are you there? Yes? No? Yes.
We're here.
Perfect. Yeah. So integration, you have the European Union, which is the most successful case, and in that case, you have countries that came out of World War II, and they didn't want to go back to that traumatic experience of again, the meeting will end in 10 minutes. We'll have to do this again, right, guys, until I can resolve this. So this might disconnect in 10 minutes, but in the next session, well, once we're back in again, we'll start with the foreign policy lecture, right? So integration, we have the European Union, and this is the idea or the policy solution in which countries eliminate economic, political, commercial barriers between them with the hopes that their economies, their societies, and their political security, right? Also security as a whole is strengthened through this unity, right? Currency stability, that's what is expected, right? From integration, economic, commercial, political integration, that the economic system gets more stable, that your currency gets more stable, that you have more negotiation power, and this is key about economic and commercial blocks and political blocks, right? Like the European Union, they get together to have a negotiation, more strength internationally, a strength that they will not have by acting individually. And the classic case of integration, this is called in our case federalism, is right the kind of federalism or integration that the project that created the United States of America, right? Different jurisdictions that consider themselves to be different entities that found that they will have more strength and more security by uniting, right? By getting together. In the American case, into a federation, a close federation of states, right? So integration in the European Union is always discussed in terms of federalism, right? How the European Union can transit or move from a supranational constitution into a federal constitution, right? So that's integration, and that happens according to this concept when countries have similar, free, open governments and economies. Any questions, comments about this, European Union? And keep in mind, write this down, this isn't here, it's not in the PowerPoint. The other most successful experience on regional integration is the organization called Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. And this organization unites most of the West Indies island nations It doesn't include Jamaica. That's why it is called the Eastern Caribbean, right? These are the islands that connect the arch of islands that go from Trinidad and Tobago all the way up to the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, all right? Dominica is a member, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, right? Antigua. And again, these islands, they have their own currency, they have a unitary immigration system, they have a Caribbean court, and they have a network of universities, right? So that's the other successful case. Functionalism, which is this concept, this rationale that countries getting together and sharing knowledge, sharing experiences, building common interests, common agendas, create a safer environment for the societies, right? And as we know, functionalism explains some things sometimes, but when things go wrong, functionalism then fails to explain, right? Now we have to look for other kind of conceptual puzzles, right? Put theories together, right? For example, in my doctorate dissertation, I worked the case of the Union of the South American, the Union of South American Nations, right? The Unión de Naciones Suramericanas, right? And this is an organization that aimed to replicate the experience of the African Union and the European Union in South America, but it failed, right? But the aspiration was that, and the idea was that South American nations have same ideals, same language, similar cultures, and that to some extent that will produce a more secure, independent South American continent, right? But it didn't work. And that's why in my thesis I work with neo-realist and Marxist theories to explain, structural theories to explain why this project didn't work, right? And then interdependence, we explained that earlier, complex interdependence, right? This level of interactions, right? Let's say, think about, for example, NAFTA back in the days, not now, because NAFTA since 2008 is a different, have changed to some extent, but you have interdependence in the case of NAFTA, right? Mexico, Canada, US economic bloc and commercial financial bloc it managed to create a community, right, of companies, banks, economic interests, bureaucrats, right, in the Mexican foreign ministry and also in the US Department of State, right, diplomats in both sides, also in Canada, diplomats experts on these agreements, and they managed to, right, to develop this social cohesion between peoples that had experience about each other's countries, right? And that also allowed for the modernization of the Mexican commercial sector, it helped in the industrialization of Mexico. It allowed more product from Mexico to get into Canada and the US, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what interdependent is. The destiny of countries being more interrelated, right? Because they are geographically near, right? And they share economic and commercial and social space, right? Space. You have questions about this? Comments? One second. Okay. Okay. So this is about realism, security dilemma, survival. We're playing all of this. Okay. Now I'm getting into. Okay. So. We have 3 more minutes. So let's start with, have you read the chapter on foreign policies or no? Yes or no? You can tell me no, and it's completely fine. Don't worry.
No,
Okay.
Not yet, at least.
Okay, let's jump into it. And then right after we finish this lecture, I will send you the homework that you will be able to work on. And again, the homework is just an activity that we can use. I will read it, I will grade it, but then we'll continue that conversation next Thursday about chapter 4 and the doubts that you might have, and also discuss chapter 5 next Thursday. Let me share this one.